Well, hello. Another big question for my yes or no treatment. Uh, in macroeconomic terms, they don't get too much bigger than this one. Was the euro a success? Well, often when I'm thinking about this series of videos, I find that it's important to think about how to actually phrase the question, what the actual question is. So I could also have said, was the euro a good idea, or even will the euro survive? I've chosen to treat this one, although there will be kind of bits of the other two in the discussion. Okay, so let's review a little bit about the background to the euro and who's in it and who isn't not in it and so forth. Well, as I guess many people know, there are 28 countries in the European Union. When the euro was first set up in 1999, 12 countries joined it. Now, there are now 19. So that leaves 9 of the current 28 who aren't in that. Only 3 of them, Britain, Denmark, and Sweden, declined to join. The other 6, I think all former Eastern European countries, haven't made the grade yet. There are certain joining criteria that you have to meet of various sorts, and they haven't done that. So there we are, a zone of kind of Westernish countries in the euro, and it is, believe me, going through turbulent times, and of course the whole coronavirus situation has made it really worse. Okay, so let's talk first of all about the yes group, those that would say yes, it has been a success. I think the first point that they would make is that you have to see the euro in the context of history, in the context of post-war history. The whole European experiment, the bringing together of the different countries in Europe, starting with the original 6, Benelux, Germany, Italy, and France, came together really as a kind of buttress against there being further wars. Europe had been devastated in the 20th century by 2 world wars, and the leaders in the post-war generation were hoping to find some mechanism for preventing that from happening again. So thus the EU was born. It started small, it got bigger and bigger, and the whole notion was expressed in the EU Constitution of pursuing ever closer union, and it was basically a mechanism to bring people together and to stop wars. The euro was a further extension of that. It was adopted in the interests of European cross-border cooperation, unity, and political stability. So in that sense, it has been not only started on with a noble objective, but seems to, in that respect, have been successful. Another reason for thinking it's been a success is that it has achieved, one at least of its primary goals, that of reducing the cost of cross-border transactions. A huge boon for tourists. My wife and I like to travel in Europe a lot. We just keep a little supply of euros on hand. We don't have to keep changing things unless we go to Eastern Europe. So that's really nice. It has also been a boon for business, eliminating currency risk in cross-border transactions. The cost of changing currencies, the cost of hedging against currency changes. At the same time, it has enhanced price comparisons and made it much easier for those who don't have great arithmetic skills to compare prices, whereas before it might have been a bit more difficult. So that's a good thing. So the whole notion of eliminating transaction costs and risks and so forth, a major step forward. And finally, as part of the process of supervising the economies of member countries, a device called the Stability and Growth Mechanism was arrived at, which provided for limitations on how big national borrowings, debt levels, and deficits could go. And that, in turn, not only fostered some discipline, but it kind of forced some otherwise less disciplined, more chaotic countries to mend their ways a bit and fall into line lest they be sanctioned by the central bank. So it was a force for good. Okay, well, that's a pretty impressive list of benefits. So let's look at those who say, in fact, it really hasn't been a success, and here we go. I suppose the number one objection and reason to feel that the euro hasn't done its job is that what it amounted to was trading off the convenience of a single currency and reducing cross-border financial transaction costs, trading that off with the naive belief that countries with dramatically different levels of productivity, financial discipline, honesty in keeping their books and so forth could ever be brought together into a single framework and be expected to operate as one. It just simply hasn't been the case, and it just demonstrates that the whole idea was naive to begin with. The stability and growth mechanism, pact, that was provided to make sure this happened, was at times abandoned, even by the biggest countries. So as a consequence of that, that discipline, when it was really needed, just simply wasn't there. The result of that anomaly, that difficulty of there being dramatically different capabilities amongst countries, especially between the, as it were, the Mediterranean countries versus the kind of more sober northern countries. The difficulty is that eventually, as things got a bit tougher, the northern countries, one way or another, through some mechanism, through the central bank or whatever, wound up having to bail out the southern countries. And this has been going on continually. It was most prominent in the case of Greece, but also in the case of Ireland, Portugal, Iceland, and so forth, all of whom got into financial difficulty. That is not an inconsiderable problem. And as a famous Wall Street pundit whose writing I greatly admire, Terry Smith, he wrote a classic book called Accounting for Growth that showed how companies cheat in the way they report their earnings. Terry Smith said, look, he said this some years ago, but I think it's still true, the authorities in Europe really have a simple choice. They can either continue to support and finance the unending deficits in the south of Europe forever, or they can abandon the euro. It's as simple as that. Well, gosh, that's a dire statement, but there's something from a smart chap who's certainly made a lot of money investing, and I think he knows what he's talking about. Of course, what we have seen in recent years, despite some squabbling and some argument about the mechanisms, is that this process of the North bailing out the South continues. It's sometimes irreverently referred to in the press as kicking the can down the road. just continue to do something that doesn't have a long-term future, but hoping that, against hope, that somehow it will go away. And of course, that's the stuff of politicians, isn't it? They always like to avoid, if they can, biting the bullet themselves and let somebody else worry about it. Well, of course, it's come to its extreme situation, and really exacerbated by the coronavirus in the case of Italy. By one calculation, in terms of dealing with both debt and deficits, Italy will need something like 2 trillion euros in the next couple of years. Well, that's just simply not going to happen. And of course, there's argument about what should happen. And of course, the eventual result is that Italy is going to drop out, which of course will present a chaotic situation. As a result of that, the banks in Europe, as well as the European Central Bank, are going to have to face up to the fact that they have a lot of dodgy assets on their balance sheets in the form of loans to some of these countries, including Italy, that are never going to get paid back, certainly not on a 100% basis. Any private bank being examined by security analysts that was not holding those assets on its balance sheet at their current market value would be marked down greatly and perhaps even wound up by the banking authorities. Not so the central bank, and not so a number of European banks that are being given the liberal treatment to hold some of these assets at an unrealistic and inflated value. So that's a horrendous debt problem lingering in the background, and it's all the fault really of the euro and the necessity to pretend that we can keep bailing out countries in the south. Next, I think on some parts, including some noteworthy politicians here during the Brexit debate, there's been the feeling that a lot of this problem has been brought about by fat cat, self-serving, smarmy Brussels bureaucrats who are really just interested in building their empires, broadening the EU no matter what, and are willing to do anything to keep it together, including pretending that the financial assets are okay and that there's a future and that the can be kicked down the road indefinitely. Well, increasingly that is being questioned. And then finally, what we've now discovered, and another reason to believe that the euro has really not succeeded as it should, is the notion that it has demonstrated that Keynesian solution to macroeconomic problems are not available to member countries of the euro. Put briefly, Lord Keynes said that in tough times, what you do is run budget deficits and pump money into the economy to stimulate growth. But at the same time, you do the opposite. You hike interest rates and run lower deficits or even budget surpluses in order to arrest inflation. Well, of course, the problem is when you have differential situations within European countries where one should be doing one of those things and the other should be doing the other of those things, and you can't do it because it's just one currency with one interest rate, and as a consequence of that, Keynesian solutions are largely unavailable. Wow, that's tough. And that really is a very strong conceptual reason even for why the euro perhaps was doomed from the start, but certainly why it has not succeeded, because we've repeatedly had situations where that dilemma was addressed and was not able to be dealt with adequately. Okay, well, what's my take on all of this? Well, it is obviously a very tough situation, but what I would say is that the euro has run up against two almost impenetrable problems and situations that it can't ignore. The first is that some countries are just much more productive than others and much more disciplined. And the system simply hasn't accommodated that difference. Supposedly, the Stability and Growth Pact was supposed to do it, but it's been widely abandoned, ignored, honored in the breach, as they say. And so that particular problem and objection really hasn't been met. The second one is that politicians have always liked the stimulus half of the Keynesian solution. They're always ready to spend more money than they really should. And with something like the coronavirus, of course, it's a wonderful opportunity for them to spend on everything they can think of, even those that don't have anything to do with the coronavirus. Witness what's going on with President Trump. So, because of that, the euro just simply is running up against an inability to impose any sort of discipline on member countries as it is supposed to be doing. And for those two reasons, alas, I think it was kind of a nice idea. I'm certainly all in favor of solidarity, political union, preventing more world wars, et cetera, but I'm afraid the days are numbered, and that the coming explosion in Italy will be the touch paper that starts the abandonment of the euro. Well, sorry to have to be as blunt about it, but there it is. That's what I think. Well, I hope you liked it, and if you didn't, give me a comment, a like, subscribe, please. Hit the notification bell. And by the way, if you have any further suggestions for these, please let me know. Leave them in the comments section, and I will assess whether they seem like suitable subjects to address. Okay, thanks a lot. See you at the next one. Bye-bye.